welcome to session 1 of today's event with Hearst. I am so happy to be here with you and joined by some incredible speakers. Today we have Kim Myhre, who is CEO and Managing Partner of Experience Designed, and Nikki Clare, who is Head of Events and Client Service at Hearst Live. Today we ask the question, is there potential for designing new experiences with hybrid events? And it's an important question to ask. These hybrid events are not a new concept born in the COVID era. They have been around for a while. Hybrid is important. It blends the best of in-person experiences with virtual experiences. And I'm really, really pleased to be here and talking about this topic today. So without further ado, I've got some questions for our speakers. And the first one, Nikki, I'm going to go to you. What have been your experiences with hybrid events so far in a nutshell?
So I have to be honest, we actually haven't done a huge amount to date, but obviously the whole experience with COVID-19 has made us really kind of review our business. So our focus really in the last 12 weeks has been around how do we pivot our business both in the short term, but also the longer term. And we view, whilst in the short term, virtual events will naturally be our focus, longer term hybrid events will absolutely take a priority for us. So we've kind of been doing some in-depth planning, working with both our commercial partners, but also with our consumers to garner insights. And what we've established is that it's really important that people have that kind of multi-sensory experience when they come to an event or whether they tune in virtually. We know the power of live experience and being there in person, and our aim is to be able to deliver that as best we can in a hybrid model. So we're looking at how we're very smart with our planning in terms of getting products into people's hands, even if they're watching along online, or whether we are still running some physical events, probably going into 2021, but running physical events, but then having an option for people to tune in remotely. And there's two main drivers behind that for us. One is commercially. It gives our commercial partners opportunity to engage with audiences that they perhaps wouldn't at a live event, but also to get their products in people's hands. And also the same for a consumer. We want them to have a really strong and powerful experience wherever they're tuning into the event, whether that's in person or virtually. So our focus is how we deliver that premium content-led experience at Hearst Live.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kim, what are your experiences so far, please?
Yeah, I think I've had a little more experience at developing hybrid experiences over the last, quite a few years now, actually, to be honest, and particularly in the technology clients and their customers. They're pretty tech enabled, and they live in sort of an on-live world. Part of their world is online, part of it is live. So, sort of merging those two platforms together has been extremely important. And, just in terms of, content streaming and broadcasting, and, we've done event TV where we're literally, broadcasting parts of the event and what's going on there. And of course, on-demand content and online content. I think it's been happening, and it's becoming, in our world anyway, in my world, an increasingly important part of the overall live experience, that you do have these digital platforms. I don't think it's one or the other. We live kind of in that mixed environment today. That's how we experience the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are so many of us who have had a little taste of what that world looks like already. I know, with my work, we live stream our conferences anyway. So we do have people attending virtually. But obviously it's a journey to get there. So can you tell me, Kim, I'll ask you first, have there been any challenges along the way that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, I think, again, this in some ways, while tragic, I think there's one perspective is to kind of view the COVID-19 problem here as an opportunity to maybe reassess and reevaluate what we've been doing. I had lots of clients who were doing events the same way for years and years and years, and their perspective was, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it's broke, so now's a really great opportunity to fix it. And I'm not sure that the live event format was necessarily the most productive for lots of kinds of content sharing and networking and information. The truth is, we don't need to go to an event to network. We don't need to go to an event to get content or entertain ourselves or communicate. So really now putting a premium on and more emphasis on the live aspects of being together, with the benefits of how you can curate content in a much more powerful way and more consumable way and more shareable way through digital.
Yeah, definitely. Nikki, what about you? Any key learnings so far in your journey?
I think probably for us, one of our most recent learnings, we pivoted our Women's Health live event, which is normally held at the BDC for 6,000 people. We pivoted that to a virtual event. And it was really powerful to see the community that we were able to build for that. We've actually done it now twice and probably plans to do an additional one. But the key learning for us from that is that we, going into probably 2021, touching on the hybrid piece, we are a kind of 360 content business at Hearst. We have obviously a whole range of magazines, our online platforms, and our events business. And what we want to see is a much more integrated approach. And things like Women's Health Live Virtual have given us that opportunity to see how we can build communities online that can also translate to being there physically in person. But we anticipate it will very much be a hybrid going forward.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really interesting. And actually, that's an event that I'd love to attend, virtual or live. So Kim, may I ask you, have you got any examples of really sort of forward-thinking online event features that actually enhance that audience experience, or, you know, open up new ways for businesses and brands to engage?
Yeah, I think this is really an interesting concept. There are lots of people today talking about, you know, you need to look at television broadcasting to understand how to create virtual events. I think that there, you know, while it's kind of very superficial, there's some truth there. And it is about the quality and curation and production of content. And the live experiences we have been creating could take a lesson from that too. Live content delivery is not always in the best format and curated in the best way with the best speakers. So I think what we need to focus on here is our audience, and also think about our audience now as being able to leave with a click, versus if they're at a live event and they've flown there and they've stood in the registration line and they've checked in and they've already hung their coat up. They're kind of captive in some strange sort of way that they can sit through a lot. Even though it's not very good. In the digital world, they don't have to sit through it. So keeping them engaged and interested, and also offering them opportunities to participate are going to be the keys, I think, to online event and online, just generally, experience production moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Nikki, what about you? Any key features that you'd mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what we've just said, it is for us around kind of making sure that that experience is as strong at home as it is in person. And I think technology actually does allow us to do that in quite smart ways. And I've already seen some really great stuff online in terms of, you know, you can obviously go into breakout rooms, or you can look at different levels of access to content. There's obviously right now, I think we're all probably experiencing a bit of Zoom fatigue or content overload. There's so much content out there. And certainly when we're looking at planning for the back end of the year, we need to be really sure that our content is really rich and that a consumer will want to tune in for a full, I think 39 minutes is the optimum amount of time online. So for us, the feedback we've had from our consumers is it probably needs to be something where they can learn a skill or learn something. They don't just want to hear from necessarily like a high profile name, for example. There's absolutely a place for that. But our feedback is very strongly there needs to be a real purpose to them attending a virtual event, and for them to almost give up their time because they're not traveling and they're not necessarily paying for it in the same way. They have to really feel a need to engage for the full duration, and that's really key for us as well.
Yeah, and it's so important. I think so many people are pivoting and pivoting well, but without that strategy and that why behind it, it can just be, you know, a webinar that's online that someone can click on and zone out of. So having those interactions and those key moments that we just strive to create at our in-person events, I think is so important. Now, I'd like to just mention to anyone that is tuning in, we do have a bit of time reserved at the end for any questions, so feel free to pop those in the chat box at any time. But I've got another question for you both, and I'm going to pose this one to Nikki first. So, Nikki, how do you think venues and suppliers can sort of best support and facilitate this hybrid events model that we are going to be seeing?
I mean, I think probably the most obvious thing is around the implementation of tech within venues. I think that's really going to be important for us because we know that we're going to want to be able to stream live events, and therefore we need to see high quality tech in venues to ensure that we can do that. I guess that for me is kind of number one thing. But also, obviously, the other thing we want to really preserve is that the experience that a consumer has or a guest has when they're live versus online, we want to ensure that that's very, very similar. We don't want someone to feel like they're missing out by not being there in person. So I think for us, some of that is going to be around how are we working with our suppliers to create a very similar experience online. So for example, in a kind of very detailed version, but if we were to look at having a speaker who's participating virtually, we'd want to have the same backdrop in terms of the production as we do as the room in real life. So it's quite small nuances, but I think that's going to be really important, that the quality of the content that we're putting out to our delegates is the same wherever you're tuning in, and also the same for the speakers that are taking part. And I think for us as well, we've been doing a lot of kind of procurement around suppliers over the last few weeks. And we want to see suppliers that can kind of offer that full 360 package. So it's that ticket integration, it's the multi-stream of content, it's being able to host content in a third-party platform that's kind of either behind a paywall or in a kind of, you need a login to access it. And that content needs to be available live, but also on demand. And when we refer to it being on demand, we need it to be available very, very quickly. So I think turnaround times and things like that, people are still going to want to consume content instantly. We're all very used to that with Instagram and such. So I think that's going to be really important, as well as seeing some really smart innovations from suppliers. But they need to be cost effective, because we know that certainly in the short term, we're probably heading into a global recession, that money and budgets for some events may well be tighter. So we need to make our events work really, really hard to deliver the best ROI for our commercial partners and obviously also for our consumers.
Absolutely. Kim, any suggestions for venues and suppliers?
Well, I entirely agree with Nikki that the tech infrastructure piece of it is extremely important. And that means understanding, even in terms of layout and facilities, which kinds of facilities and layouts are best for digital production. And, so there is going to have to be some work there. I think the other thing is that, it's the events industry has been a really interesting one. I think it's generally been viewed in terms of a broadcast medium, even though it's live. And, I can't tell you how many clients get so happy that they get thousands of people, even though really only a couple hundred of them are relevant to what they're trying to achieve. I think we're going to, in post-COVID, I think we're going to have to look at how we manage crowds and how we understand who our audience is and build propositions that are based on engagement, not necessarily in numbers. And that's going to have an impact on venues and how they structure their business. It won't be so much about selling square meters than it will be about creating environments that reflect brands' aspirations. And that's going to require more strategic thinking on their part versus just a sales approach.
Absolutely. I think we're going to be looking for that. Certainly, when you are going out to venues, you make a really interesting point about the square meters of a venue. You see that straight away, right? When you look at a meeting room, that's the first thing they say on all the websites, all the lists. So really important. So now we're going to go to the audience and a few questions. Now I have one that's just come in, which Kim, I'll go to you first, please. And this is from someone who is currently planning the move to hybrid events. They are academic in nature and involve a lot of roundtable discussions. Now, audience participation, our assumption is that we should have separate sort of tables, real social distance ones and virtual ones. So then that's combining your virtual attendees with your live attendees. Kim, do you have any tips on how we might get those online and in-person participants to interact?
Yeah, I think obviously this is with the current tools that we're using. This is one of the challenges, really, keeping people speaking to a limited time, not speaking over one another, finding ways of not letting those who aren't the most outgoing not participate, while the ones who are outgoing, kind of dominating the call. There's been lots written about this in the last month or so. Lots of people have come out. And I think there's a lot to learn in terms of group psychology, outside the events world, that says, establishing ground rules, even gamifying how you manage panel discussions. Like you have a timer, you can only speak for so long. Everybody gets an opportunity, different kinds of establishing ground rules that can be fun and also can make sure that they're engaging everybody on the panel. and giving them an opportunity to participate are ways to work with that. I think it's not so much the technology's fault, it's kind of our fault about how we manage group meetings, even live, let alone online. So I think, that kind of how do people interact, the psychology of that, applying rules and principles of how you do it, and even using some gamification are kind of some of the keys to making those things more fun, more survivable, and also more useful.
Absolutely. And Nikki, how have you seen or sort of produced in your planning any examples of how you can make online and live attendees feel like they're at the same event together?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably, again, referring to Women's Health Live Virtual, obviously I appreciate that was just an online event, but I think it comes back to what I touched on at the start. It's very much around the power of building communities. So providing a platform where all of the delegates can interact, I think works really, really well. And we saw lots of watch parties because it was streamed on Facebook Live. We saw a lot of people engaging. So we ran it across Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. We had a community manager on site to ensure that we were engaging with all of our consumers. Now, we would expect to do the same when we pivot to being in a more hybrid setting, so that there is that opportunity for those that are tuning in online to interact. So whether it's putting a Q&A to a speaker who may be on stage, that shouldn't matter where you're interacting with the event from. So we'll be really kind of looking at how we best manage that and make sure that the experience is the same. It's naturally going to be slightly different because you're not physically there. But I think also some of the elements that we're looking at around, for example, do we send products to people's homes? They may consume it at home or they may have it at the live event. The same with gift bags. You may get it on the day, but you may also receive it just before the event. So for us, we're looking at every single element of the event and how do we translate that into a virtual element, because we know how to do it in live. We're very well experienced at that. But I think there are really smart and simple ways that we can do it. So I'm confident that we can absolutely achieve a really, really strong experience for both.
Yeah, definitely. Another question for Kim. This is talking about exhibitors and how we interact. So how do you enable that multi-sensorial experience at an expo, particularly encouraging virtual attendees to interact with the exhibitors?
Yeah, this is really, again, an interesting opportunity. And this has changed a lot. I mean, the reality of it is today that most exhibitions, many exhibitions are not so much about showing product as they are about meeting potential customers. And we're seeing this more and more, where stands essentially have become on-floor meeting spaces or greeting spaces, as opposed to, you're not going in to sort of check out the spark plugs on the thing. So I think it's interesting that you can create in VR and AR and using mixed realities, you can create pretty compelling product demonstrations and pretty compelling materials that you can participate in either digitally, so you're not there physically, or even physically within the environment. And those tools can be things that can be used in both formats. So I think we're going to see more of that, that experience of using virtual technologies and design technologies to help bring products more to life in a digital format, whether it's live or online.
Yeah, definitely. Now I think we're about to run out of time, so I'm going to pose one last question to you both, and it's a big one. Will there be any events that do not have a virtual event element going forward? Nikki, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I think there will, because we still very much believe in the power of live experience. I think depending on the nature of events, so for example, we run Harper's Bazaar Women of the Year Awards. To run that as a virtual event just wouldn't make sense when you're pulling together the caliber of the attendees that we are. However, I do still believe that we will see content that will be available, which we already do across Hearst, whether that's in our print magazines or digitally. But I do think the virtual event element won't be mandatory for every event.
Sure. Kim?
Yeah, I think it's probably likely that there will be, experiences of people meeting without the organizer providing a digital format. But I think we have to be accepting of the fact that we generally today live in this on-live world where we're driving our cars, but we're being instructed by sat-nav. We live in an on-live experience. So even in live events without digital event components, people are going to be using their own tools within that experience. And if you want to create a holistic experience that engages your audience in a meaningful way, you're going to have to adapt, and you're going to have to understand that that's the world they live in.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Nikki. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us this morning. Please continue the conversation. The hashtag for the event today is hashtag #HSPresents. And stay tuned. We will see you in the next session. Thanks so much, everyone.